Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome to the University of Southampton School of Psychology podcast. My name is Jacob Juhl. I'm an associate professor of psychology at the University of Southampton, and this is the podcast where we take a look at the people within the School of Psychology at the University of Southampton. Specifically, we're going to learn about the educational and career pathways of professors, lecturers, students, as well as alumni. And I hope we don't just learn about these individuals. I hope we can also learn from their experiences pursuing their education and careers. And so let me introduce our first guest on the podcast, Clare Hart. Clare is an associate professor of psychology. She's a social psychologist, and she's a member of the Center for Research on Self and Identity. I'm not going to give any more biographical details than that because we're going to get all of this good information directly from her. So let's get started. Clare Hart, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to just kind of talk through your history, talk about how you got to where you are today in your career. And yeah, I want to start from the very beginning if we can.
Okay.
So where are you originally from?
I grew up in a place called Westgate-on-Sea in Kent.
Okay. And did you live there all the way till you went to uni?
That's right, yeah. Lived in the same house from the moment I was born up until 18, when I decided to make that leap to come to Southampton.
Okay. Now, you were not an only child, were you?
Nope, there's an older sibling. So I've got an older sister and a younger sister as well.
So I'm a bit of a UK outsider still. I know I've been here for 12 years, but compared to back in the US, there's a more varied path that people can take to get to university here in the UK. Mm-hmm. So could you just very quickly walk me through all the different levels from primary or junior or whatever they were called for you up until you finished your PhD?
Sure. So I went to an infant school. It was St Crispin's, and then moved on to a junior school, St Saviour's, also in Westgate. And following that, I went to a grammar school. So back in Kent, they still have the 11 plus. So you have to take an exam that sort of decides which kind of school that you then go into. So I passed the 11 plus, which meant that I could go to a grammar school. And we'd have to do a 30-minute bus ride every morning to get to Broadstairs to go to Dane Court. And I did everything there, so all the way up to my GCSEs, and then I stayed on. You could either stay on or go elsewhere, and I chose to do my A-levels there as well. So that was in 1997. I finished at Dane Court before applying to come to Southampton. And I've been here ever since.
Okay.
So, I actually did my BSc here. And then I was actually the last year where you didn't have to do a master's before your PhD.
Okay.
So I decided to be a research assistant for a year. And after that point, I stayed on to do my PhD. So I finished my degree in 2000. Was a research assistant until 2001, and then I started my PhD, which I finished in 2005.
So obviously, you're very academic now. In fact, you are an academic. But starting from, I guess it would have been infant school for you, correct?
Yeah.
Were you always an academic person? Did you like school?
I loved school.
Really?
I absolutely loved school. I would be sad that the school holidays were as long as they were. I was always keen to get back. I was a bit of a teacher's pet. I remember, many of the teachers would say, oh, we'd love to have a class full of Clares, just because I was so eager to learn. I was one of those geeky kids who even quite liked doing exams because it was an opportunity to review all of the content that we'd been learning and, look at it from different perspectives. So when it came to GCSEs and A-levels, I was in my glory because, I got to revise lots of content of interesting subjects. I'm strange. But I've always loved school. I love doing homework. I've been a nerd since day one.
Were there any particular subjects that you fancied the most or were particularly good at?
I have always sort of been keen on maths, and I love doing biology actually, and all sort of the practical side of that. And our school only introduced psychology. Was I the first year or the second year? I can't remember. So when it came to the choices to do A-levels, I saw psychology was an option. I didn't really know what psychology was, but I thought, that sounds interesting, when they gave us a sort of an overview of the content. And I'm so glad I did choose that. And I had a teacher called Mr. Meir for 2 years who inspired me and got me excited about the topics of psychology. I still sort of stay in contact with him now. We have updates every now and again on Facebook, usually sort of around New Year's.
Yeah.
I've always loved science as well. At one point, I did consider in sort of the early days becoming a medical doctor because I was really into, understanding how the human body worked. Not so good with gore and blood and guts when it actually comes to the practical side of things, though. So psychology route suited me better.
When you were a kid, did you have some sort of career that you aspired to?
I can't remember actually really having a strong urge to do anything in particular. I mean, there were points where I would have loved to have been, a singer and an actress and things like that. But I think that's just sort of part of growing up. And then I didn't actually have the confidence to do those things because I was, not quite nerdy, but also quite reserved and shy, probably until I did my PhD, really.
Yeah.
And then, something just changed. And then when you have an audience in front of you when you're teaching, for example, I could sort of totally embrace that now, whereas the thought of something like that when I was younger would terrify me.
I think I feel the exact same way, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to, you mentioned, was it Mr. Meir?
Mr. Meir, yeah.
Was that at A level or just before it?
That was A level.
That was A level, okay. Yeah. And so you didn't really know what psychology was,
no.
But you thought it looked interesting.
Yep.
And you gave it a go. What else did you do for A levels?
I did psychology, biology, and English literature.
Okay. Why all those other things as well?
I think it was partly strategic because I was good at them. I've always been a bit of a strategist. But I've always enjoyed reading. So English literature was good. And then to be able to delve into stories and poetry in depth sort of was very enjoyable. And also has helped in terms of sort of writing now even. Biology, again, it complements, I think, psychology really nicely. So what's happening with the mind and what's happening with the body, how do they complement each other? So it just, and it serves well when I came and did my psychology degree to understand, how stress affects the human body or how the eyes and perception all works. Having that biological background, I think, helped with that transition as well to understand, some of the topics that we were covering in the curriculum at that time.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that you still find some of those other subjects useful.
Yeah.
For me, when I was a young child, none of them felt useful to me. But the further along I went down my educational path, the more and more I appreciated all of these other things that I had to learn. And I think it's a good or an important part of, I guess in your case, becoming an academic, right? Mm-hmm. So at what point during your A levels did you think that psychology was the route you wanted to do at university?
I think from early on, I mean, when it came to doing all the coursework and the exams, I was getting, sort of 90 to 100% in everything. And without even really trying, I just seemed to understand it and get it. And it kind of seemed to come quite naturally to me. And I just found everything fascinating. It was the only subject that I really considered for moving forward and pursuing for my degree.
What was it about Southampton that made you decide to apply here and then decide to come here?
Yeah, I did have some family here. So my auntie was here. And I think, I've always been a homebody. So moving away from home was quite a scary concept. I mean, it's only 3 hours away, but still, having a support system here was an added bonus. I did look at some alternatives as well. But yeah, there was, as soon as I came here, there was just something, I was just like, oh, it's a really funny old building. But I felt at home here and I loved the campus and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And I can remember that they put on a really good food spread and that had me because I love food. And yeah, I was so impressed. So it felt friendly. They fed me up. And yeah, I can even remember now vividly walking up one of the stairwells in the Shackleton building going, I think I could quite happily come here. And I did.
You said that, you were always a good student. Was that more difficult as you transitioned to university, being away from home, having to manage your own time a bit more? What was feeling, I guess, university life out along with academics? What was that like for you?
I think I was really lucky because I was put into accommodation with some fantastic other people. So that helped with the transition straight away. I enjoyed the topics we were covering from day one, and the fact that we were learning in so much more depth than we did at A level as well. Bearing in mind that when I was a student here, the cohort sizes were a lot smaller, so there were only about 80 of us. So you did get to know the people on your course a lot more. And even within that, there were like smaller seminar groups and things like that. So it was quite different. It was a shock to my system in terms of how things worked and how things were graded, because I can remember like when I started to hand in coursework and, I was used to getting 90s and 100s. And then the fact that we had this categorical marking system and it worked very differently. So, and I was getting sort of low 60s for things. And I was just like, wow, what am I doing wrong? But it's about, understanding how the system, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means there's an adjustment period as you have to realise, what you're being asked to do. And A level was very much about regurgitation. It was how much can you recall, in an exam setting. And then I realised, how much does that actually get you in life? Being able to understand this content and actually be able to use it and generalise it is a very different skill from how much can I remember. But and eventually I learnt to embrace that way of learning as well.
Could you say a little bit more about how you adjusted to the different marking scheme? Did you feel like psychologically you had to come to accept something that you weren't originally prepared to accept in terms of your marks?
I think so. I was one of the students who wanted a good work-life balance as well. It wasn't really until I started my PhD that I knuckled down and worked really, really hard. I wanted to make the most of the student experience as well.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a 2-1 student. I didn't push myself to try and get that first, but I was very fortunate enough to, people could see how motivated I was, and I was able to get a scholarship in order to do my PhD.
You talk about the work-life balance. Do you have any regrets about how you managed your time during your undergraduate years?
Not really. I had a wonderful time. So made lots of really good friends that are friends for life. And lots of good experiences. Could I have worked harder? Maybe. But has it stopped me from progressing to where I want to be? No. I don't know, maybe part of me. No, I don't think so.
One reason why I ask is because I have regrets. But mine is that I didn't spend enough time with people. I had loads of friends because of the activities that I was in. I was seeing people all the time.
Yeah.
But I always chose to be in the library when there was the option to do that. So,
right.
And I do regret not having that work-life balance. And I get the sense mostly from our students here that if they do have regrets, it's that they wish they studied a bit more.
Yeah. I do think that, university is a very unique experience. And you kind of, while you're here, you're in a bubble. And I try to encourage all of my students to make the most of the experience. Like there will be plenty of opportunities that will come along, allowing you to stretch your learning, to go along and listen to something that you don't know whether or not you'd find interesting, expand your horizons, join lots of different societies and clubs, things that you maybe were too shy to do before. Just try different things. This is a really great opportunity. You have time, you have headspace, just see what's out there, test the waters. Because, once you leave and you've got a job and you've got responsibilities, it's much harder to, just try something new. This is the best time. And, I'm not saying don't work hard, obviously, because, I want to encourage people that the world has changed and things are a lot more competitive these days in terms of what you need and how rounded your CV has to be before you even, leave university. And things were very different back in my day. It didn't matter that I didn't have a published paper by the time, I'd finished my undergraduate degree. And I'm not saying that you should have one by the end you finish your undergraduate degree, but, it's a very different world now. And I think that by take in these various different opportunities, it can be good for you, your well-being and sort of expanding yourself, but it can also be good for, this well-rounded CV that's going to make you competitive in whatever next steps that you choose to take as well.
Did they have the tutor-tutee system when you were an undergraduate that we have today?
No.
Did you have a tutor at all?
I did have in the third year, I had a tutor who was also my supervisor for my final year project.
And who was that?
Richard Hastings,
okay.
A developmental psychologist.
Okay, who's no longer here.
He's not.
Asking about your final year research project, was that your very first experience conducting research yourself, or did you assist with anybody's research prior to that?
It would have been my third year project. And I did, it was hard because I was supposed to be doing some sort of cross-cultural study and it fell through. And so I had to change the direction of the research at the last minute. But again, that was an eye-opener for how research sometimes works. It doesn't always go smoothly. It doesn't always go to plan. And it was after that then I became a research assistant for Mark Van Vugt, who became my PhD supervisor. And I learned a lot in that year, and it prepared me very well for doing my PhD. I worked on various different projects, got some publications out of that in top-tier journals.
That's great.
It allowed me to then really hit the ground running when I actually started my PhD.
How did you get that research assistant gig after your final year of uni?
I had first of all applied to the government for funding to do a PhD, and I wasn't successful. But from what I can remember, Mark had a pot of money. Maybe he'd got a grant or something, and was advertising at the same time for a research assistant. And I applied for it. And if I remember rightly, I didn't get it. Yeah, I didn't get it. But then the other person who did get offered the job decided after a few weeks that they weren't interested. So I suddenly got a phone call. At that point, I had considered taking a job, or I'd been offered a job at an insurance company. And I already knew that wasn't something that was going to suit me. I'm not a 9-to-5 person.
Yeah.
But I had been doing it sort of temporarily over the summer. They'd offered me a job, and I was in that negotiation stage. And then, I can remember having a phone call saying, this is available now if you'd like it. And I was just like, oh, yes, please. And so, I worked. I think it was for just over a year, the post, the research assistant post.
Okay, so does this mean that during your undergraduate years, you didn't know for sure what you were going to do when you were done?
No, I actually didn't really know what a PhD even was until the end of my third year. And then Richard Hastings had got in contact with me, sort of sat me down and said that an email had come round to the department. Emails weren't like a big thing even then. People very rarely used them or checked them. And saying that there was various different sort of opportunities to apply for funding. And would I like to do it? And I was just like, don't know what a PhD is. And so, he described, that you would conduct a piece of research and quite intensively for 3 years. And at the end of it, you'd get a doctor title. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll do that. So it piqued my interest. And then I was going to do a sort of a project with Richard Hastings and Mark Van Vugt. So we'd put together a proposal, submitted that, didn't get it. Then I worked with Mark as a research assistant. And then during that time, I realised how passionate I was about group membership and sort of dynamics of groups and how they work, which was what I was sort of working on as part of that research assistant position. And so I changed the focus of my PhD to sort of drop the developmental side of things and just focus on social psychology.
Okay.
And that's how I came up with the phenomenon that is called group fission. So when groups decide to split for reasons of like resource problems and then looking at how they split.
Okay.
And I termed it fission.
Okay. So going back to that year that you were a research assistant, you said that it's just a great overall experience. You learned so many skills. Can you say a little bit more about the specific skills
Sure.
That you learned, or maybe even the specific tasks that you did during that year?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time I was sat in cubicles collecting data. I did some literature reviews. I taught myself how to program computer studies in something called Authorware, which I don't think even exists anymore. And I wrote a manual for others to be able to use Authorware as well. And I was paid to do that, which was lovely, which meant I had an opportunity to go over to, was it Texas, for my first SPSP conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was during that year?
That was during that
Wow.
time. My stats skills were developed very rapidly because I was collecting and analysing a lot of the data that was then, say, published. We got a paper in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, which is, like what we all aim for as social psychologists, and a Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, where we were doing some research on leadership as well. So, I mean, that put me in a really good position then to reapply for funding for working on my group vision work.
At some point around this time, I know you started to get involved in another extracurricular activity, specifically kickboxing. Where exactly did that starting point happen in terms of starting your PhD and doing that research assistant year? And how did you get involved in that?
Sure. I'm one of those people who struggles to concentrate on one thing at one time. I like to be busy. I like to have my fingers in lots of pies. And when I took on doing the PhD, I had some slight concerns that I'd get bored, and I didn't want to get bored, which is a silly thing to think anyway, because, it's a busy time. You don't get an opportunity to be bored, but that was my concern. So I decided to rope my friend into going along to a women's only kickboxing class, just, for something to do, something that was different, expand our horizons, do something that was healthy. And she was actually a student nurse herself. So she had trouble having sort of that regular slot being available because she'd have to go and do various different sort of shift work. So I would quite often have to turn up by myself. And then it soon transpired that nobody ever wanted to fight with me.
And that was because?
That was because I realised that I could kick and punch very hard. And I found it really difficult to not punch and kick really hard. So I was quite often paired up with the person who was teaching the class. And that person was Master Tay, who is the head of Wu-Tan UK.
Okay.
And is a very admired and skilled martial artist. And so he saw my speed and my strength and asked if I would like to come along to some more intense training, like on some Saturday trainings. And I was quite flattered. And I thought, yeah, okay, if it's an opportunity to be able to get out my aggressions. So I went along to them, and there were very few females. So quite often I would have to fight with like the men. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, I got into it so much that before I knew it, I was competing. Then the training stepped up a gear. So I would be getting up at like, say, 5 o'clock in the morning. I would train for an hour to an hour and a half before then coming to work. And then I'd be sitting at my desk, eating my breakfast and doing a full day of work and then going and training again in the evening. So it got to the point where, I was training for the Great British team and, with aspirations to fight in the 2008 Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was pretty hardcore. And then, doing this alongside the PhD as well. There were numerous times where luckily I wasn't teaching at that point. So I was kind of like working away in my research office, but it wouldn't be unusual for me to have a black eye.
Actually, I remember, so my PhD supervisor used to be a lecturer here, and he used to share an office with you for a short time.
He did, yes.
But that was after your PhD, I think was complete.
That was when I was a research fellow, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know, I was in a meeting with him, and we were talking about Southampton, and we're talking about you, and he said that you would come in, clearly having been fighting that very morning.
Yeah.
and then you'd go do it again.
Yeah.
When you first were talking about how you got into it, it seemed like there's maybe a sense of surprise that you were as skilled as you were. I mean, you talked about being very academic growing up. Were you also sporty growing up?
No,
or?
I wasn't.
Really?
And I guess that's where the surprise came from because, I've never been particularly athletic. I think, quite often you find that there's that divide, don't you? If you're a bit geeky, you tend not to necessarily be sporty. That's a bit of a stereotype. But, so I did surprise myself. I thoroughly enjoyed it and embraced it, and I think it helped with my confidence. And clearly, all of my life, I have had a bit of a competitive side, and some of that was competing against myself. Like, can I do better on the next test? Or, but then I realised that I had that sort of competitive streak where I wanted to be the best at what I was doing in terms of the martial arts, in terms of the PhD. And there was just this inner drive that I had. I just wanted to really challenge myself and see what I could actually do.
Okay, so it just became another outlet for, I guess, your strong achievement motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah. The intensity of the work that you're doing. Would you advise or tell others that doing all that at once is a good idea? Would you encourage other people to do that?
Not necessarily. I mean, for me, it worked. And it meant that when I was very wide awake by the time I got into my PhD office and was, doing all of my work. I was very alert. But I do think, for me, it became a routine and it became normal. And it's only, I think, sometimes once you stop that you realise how intense things actually were. And I actually had to stop as a result of an injury. So in 2007, I went out to the World Championships in Beijing. And
was that just prior to the Olympics?
It was almost like a rehearsal for the Olympics. Okay. So we were there in the Olympic Village to kind of test everything out. But I was helping somebody to warm up just before their fight. And we just kicked each other awkwardly. And I'd already had a bit of an injury from overtraining before going. And then the long haul flight over to China probably exacerbated things. And I ended up severing a blood vessel in my own leg.
Oh.
Yeah. And because of the fact that this other person was just about to go on for a big fight, I didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I didn't mention it to anybody. And my leg just filled up with blood from the inside. And so that had implications. By the time I got to the hospital, my leg was huge. I had like an elephant leg.
And that all happened while you were there?
Yeah. And then I was in a wheelchair for a little bit, and I had like 18 months of pain and physio.
Okay.
So that was kind of the end of my fighting career. And then I moved into the judging side of things for some time.
How long did you do that?
I did that until I was pregnant. So until 2013.
This was all after your PhD had been completed, correct?
Yes, I finished my PhD in 2005.
Okay.
20 years ago.
So going back, you finished your PhD, then you went on to, you were a research fellow, is that correct?
Yeah, I did 4 years worth of like research fellow work.
Okay.
So on 2 different contracts. So one was just for a year, and then I had a 3-year contract. And then after that, I was very ready and raring to move into the world of lecturing.
And you did?
Well, I actually left Southampton University.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were at Solent.
That's right, yeah.
Is that the first year you were away? Or okay.
Yeah, so I spent 18 months at Solent University teaching counselling psychology.
Oh, really?
Yep. But during that time, I was a visiting researcher still in my usual office here. And then when a job opening did come up, I was like, that's mine.
Okay. So at that time that you were finishing your PhD and continuing to do research, what were you investigating?
So once I finished the PhD, my first contract was to look at narcissism. And I had not looked at narcissism before, but then funnily enough, that turned out to be the thing that I would spend the rest of my career examining.
Yeah. What was it about narcissism that drew you in?
I think it was just how complex they are. And
complex narcissists
how complex narcissists are. Yeah. And, like we bandy around the term narcissism or narcissist, usually just to talk about somebody who's not very nice. But when you understand the multidimensionality of it and how there are actually different types of it, some of it is quite adaptive, some of it is quite maladaptive and socially toxic. But there are many different variants of narcissists. And I think that's what I find really fascinating, because if you understand the type of narcissist that someone is, you're much better to be able to predict the various different behaviors that they might engage in, or, how you should engage with them to get the most out of that interaction. And so I think it's over time. I think there's been lots of confusion in the literature about, what is narcissism? We've got like the social personality perspectives, we've got clinical perspectives, and sometimes there's not great overlap between them, and we kind of look at things separately. And, that sort of whole multidimensionality construct has come about more over the years. We used to just talk about narcissism as this unitary construct, but now it's much more important to break it down and understand the differences between the different types.
So looking back at the last 20 years of your research on narcissism, what is the finding or discovery that you made that has interested you the most?
I would say it's the research that relates to narcissists' lack of empathy.
Okay.
And so myself, Erica Hepper and Konstantin Zedekidis, we were the first people to actually show that narcissists can be empathic. They're just choosing not to for motivational reasons. And that's great because it opens up many doors for things that you can try to do to intervene. The other kind of psychopathy, for example, you often find that those people who score high on psychopathy aren't actually able to be empathic. So they've got, deficits in frontal regions of their brain that actually impair their ability to do so. But with narcissists, you can actually just take the perspective of this person, and they do, both at a self-report level, so they claim to be more empathic towards these people, but also at a physiological level, because you never know with narcissists. Are they just trying to please you? Are they just, trying to look good? But we can't control our inner workings, our physiology. But when we take them to our psychophys lab and we attach them to all of the equipment and ask them to take the perspective of somebody who's in an empathic scenario, we actually see, compared to their default behavior, which is like a decelerated heart rate, we actually see that they respond in a way that's similar to people who score much lower on the narcissism scale.
Okay, I see. That sounds like it's helpful for them and must be for the people that are around them, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it gives us the opportunity to explore, can we make narcissists more empathic? And we have shown that we can make them more empathic, not necessarily because they want to, but because we sell it as something that's of benefit to them.
Okay.
So whether or not that's genuine empathy or not, is questionable. But it means that there's hope for the people around them, and they're the people who usually suffer. Yeah. It's not the narcissists. They tend to be pretty psychologically healthy, but because of the social toxicity of like the narcissist, certain types of narcissists anyway, it's the people around them who generally generally suffer. Yeah. So it's about making life better for them as well.
Do you think that the benefit is more to the people around the narcissist or the narcissist?
I think that there's benefits for both ultimately. Again, if I talk about the fact that there are different types of narcissists, vulnerable narcissists who have fragile self-esteem, which differs from grandiose narcissists who have very high self-esteem, they don't tend to be as psychologically healthy. So understanding empathy better and how vulnerable narcissists can potentially use empathy to bolster their relationships with other people and still allow them to get the admiration and other things that they want, could actually help the psychological health of the vulnerable narcissist.
Do you focus on any interpersonal relationship or romantic relationships in particular, or?
All different scenarios. So, I mean, from anything from like workplace situations to friendships to I do work on parenting, for example, and so family dynamics and romantic relationships as well. So kind of like a bit of everything.
Yeah. And there is a bit of overlap here between your research and what you teach.
That's right.
Can you say a little bit more about what you teach?
Yeah. So when I returned to the University of Southampton in 2010, I was asked to teach a module on the psychology of attractiveness.
Okay.
So I've been teaching it ever since, and it's my favouriteest thing ever because it's an opportunity to talk to first-year students about the importance of the psychology of our relationships, so our friendships, our romantic relationships, and how they impact us throughout life. So we look at the trajectory from, like what attracts us to certain people, when we're in friendships or relationships with people, what does that serve in terms of our psychological health, all the way through to, what happens when relationships go bad, when they dissolve, and what implications that has for ourselves as well. And through the process of understanding relationships, I make efforts to help people have the opportunities to actually have relationships or, themselves. So we do tasks that ask people to disclose information to each other early on to help the process of speeding up friendships, for example.
Okay, yeah.
So I pre-record core content, and then every week we have workshops that get people into groups talking to each other. So it's an opportunity for them to, get to know each other. And so we're learning about the importance of relationships while trying to help to form relationships as well.
When I was an undergraduate, I learned about this study where they were doing something quite similar to what you do in the classroom, where they had participants disclose some personal information and look at each other in the eye for a while. And the story is that the very first couple to do that went on and got married.
I've had students who have got in contact with me later on to tell me about sort of romantic relationships that formed during the first year and have sort of blossomed. There was a marriage, because I can remember this was years and years ago. I hadn't been teaching very long, and I remember pointing out to everyone, which was a bit naughty really, but I noticed that there was a couple hugging at the back of the lecture theatre and it just drew my attention, and I just happened to say something out loud. And they contacted me years and years later to say that they'd got married.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's about as good a story as you could have, good experiences you could have. So what advice do you have for anyone who is currently an undergraduate or soon to be an undergraduate that wants to pursue your particular career path?
I think, I've mentioned before that the world has changed since I came to study psychology. So I guess it would be to embrace every opportunity. Through my teaching, for example, I quite often will, through the process of doing workshops, somebody might ask me a question and I go, oh, I don't actually know the answer to that. Maybe we could do a project on it. And a couple of years back, I just asked if anybody would be interested in pursuing any research. I had various different research ideas, and I was just like, does anybody want to help out with some research? And I had 17 people who wrote a very convincing argument as to why they should come and do some research with me. And I couldn't turn any of them down because they were all wonderful. And so I then had to come up with some more projects. But this is the good thing. I have, multiple PhD students, and we're always looking for people to come and help out with various different research projects, to get involved and to get that insight into what kind of things can I do, what's involved, in the background. So as students, they have to go and take part in studies, but that's when they see the final product. What's gone into coming up with that final product? How did that get designed? What was the process, the lit review and everything that happens before all of that can happen? How do they program something into the computer? And so I think my advice would be look for opportunities where you can stretch that learning to get some of that background information. There's lots of very keen, enthusiastic members of staff who would be very flattered for you to get in contact with them and say, can I come and help out with your research? And, if we have grants available, for example, then, there may be some paid work. We don't always have grants available, but if there's anything that people wanted to do on a voluntary basis, then we're more than happy to accommodate and facilitate. And And not only can that be an opportunity for you to decide, is this something I'm actually interested in? There could be possibilities to maybe get some, to get really involved in and get co-authorship on a publication. All of these things, I think, it's about thinking ahead. It's about thinking, what can I do to make myself stand out more than any other student across the UK who's doing a psychology degree at the moment. So yeah, try different things out. Be bold. Ask lots of questions, and enjoy your experience.
Yeah, I think taking advantage or looking hard into how you can get as much research experience as you can is a big one, because I guess I used to run the voluntary internship scheme that we have here. That is one way that students can get involved in research. But one thing I would say to them is, as a part of your modules, we teach you all about research. Yep. But there's a certain part about research that you can only learn by getting hands-on experience. And some of this is just, entering data, how to set up a data set, how to organize files and paperwork within the lab setting, which is all excellent skills to be able to have. And when you go off to do a master's degree or a PhD, whoever is looking at your application and can see that you already know how to do those things is a lot more attracted to you, because that means they don't have to teach it to you.
There's also somebody else who can then know you and write a reference for you as well, a letter of support.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And so I do want to say that we have this voluntary internship scheme, which is primarily for second-year students. I used to be in charge of it, but I would oftentimes have staff members or students come and say, well, I want this student to do some research with me, or I want to work with that particular member of staff. And I always said was, this scheme is really just one way to cultivate those type of things. But I always encourage staff and students to find, independent of the scheme, find ways that students can get experience, and find ways that staff can get help from students. Yeah. One other thing I want to talk about with you is, I don't know how long ago it was, but I started seeing on Facebook these pictures and videos of hedgehogs that it seemed that you were taking care of, that must have been living in your garden. Yeah. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, again, I don't do things by halves. So about 7 years ago now, I found a hedgehog at the bottom of my garden when I was watering plants late at night, and I was very, very excited. And I obviously talked a lot about this to my neighbours. So when it came to autumn, suddenly there was a knock on the door, and my neighbour was holding out a baseball cap upside down. And just sort of, they handed this thing to me, and I was like, what's in here? And it was a baby hedgehog. And I was like, oh, wow. And they said, we don't know what to do with it, but do you know what to do with it? And I was like, no. But I rang around and I got in contact with some local rescues. It was tiny, and given that it was, almost time to hibernate, it was very clear, even though I didn't at that point know very much about hedgehogs, that it probably wouldn't survive. So, I got in contact with a local rescue, and the hedgehog was overwintered. So they looked after it, fattened it up, and then it came back to me in the spring. And I just kept in contact, regular contact. I realised how many hedgehogs there were in my garden. I started feeding them. And if I noticed that there was anything wrong, I would take them to the rescue. I'd ask lots of questions, as I've always done. And eventually they said, you seem very enthusiastic about hedgehogs. Would you consider being a foster carer for them? Okay. So, when they get to the point where they've finished all of their medications, if they've got anything wrong with them and they just kind of need fattening up, can they come to you? And I was like, yes. So I did that for quite a few years. And then, because again, they could tell that I'd done a lot of reading about hedgehogs and was fascinated by them, I was then asked if I would be interested in becoming part of the rescue and actually being trained up to medicate the hedgehogs and to really understand and look after them. And when I moved house last year, convinced my partner to build me a big summer house at the bottom of the garden, which is now a hedgehog rescue. So I'm part of Hamble Hedgehogs. I'm like the overflow site. Oh, okay. So I'm site 2. And I spend most of my mornings and evenings, where I used to spend it training, I now spend it looking after hedgehogs. I actually have the BBC, a film crew, come into my house tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to film, because it's Hedgehog Awareness Week at the moment. So, I've got a film crew coming in the morning, doing live radio interviews all morning and some other interviews that are going to be put onto the BBC.
Wow.
Yep.
So what should we do if we find a hedgehog in our garden?
So if you find them out in the day, that's a problem. That's not okay. So usually there's something very bad going on. Often they come out, if they look like they're sunbathing, they're actually hypothermic. So their body's starting to shut down, usually because of internal parasites. So the important thing would be to use gloves, put it in a high-sided box because they're excellent climbers, as I found out, as many have escaped from my house in the past. Usually with, if you can, a hot water bottle, like not with boiling water, but with hot water, wrap that up in a towel and just offer that hedgehog some water, then try to get in contact with a local rescue so that they can medicate and make it better as soon as possible.
But if we see them out in the evening?
If you see them out in the evening, you're just very lucky.
Okay.
Yeah, because they are nocturnal, so they should be out in the evening. They should be scurrying around looking for food or water. And if you do put some dry cat food or dog food down in your garden, you'll probably find that more and more will come.
Well, thank you, Claire, for coming and spending time with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
On the podcast. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
A big thanks to Claire for coming on the podcast. Claire mentioned that the BBC were coming around to inquire about her work with hedgehogs. If you'd like to see a short clip of that, you can go to https://www.facebook.com/REEL/reel/156489694307389. Many thanks to Lucas Bland, James McDonald, Aranza Novella Franco for their assistance in the podcast studio. The music was written by Scott Peterson and performed by the Iowa State Drumline.